Numismatics in 2024. Buy, sell, or hold. Stay tuned. I'll explain. In order to understand where we're going, we need to understand where we've been. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Frostbyte. Now, I know many of you watching this are going to be stackers and not necessarily collectors. But you can still utilize the lessons that I'm going to go through to help you look at the items in your stack. Maybe it'll help you find something that you want to take notice of. It may talk about things that you might want to offload, or maybe some things that you want to research and add to your stack for its numismatic value. There are also items that I will go over today that we should look for when considering looking at the volatility in 2024. But there are lessons that can be learned by understanding the market and the external factors, such as things like a strengthening or weakening economy, inflation, recession, and GDP performance in similar years. So in this video, I'm going to do a couple things. Number one, I'm going to give you a brief history. But number two, I'm going to give you some valuable resources and hopefully provide you some great information that allows you to make smarter numismatic choices in 2024. So let's go with the history first. The first thing I want to do is I want to backtrack to the 1980s. Now, during the early 80s, the economy was fairly strong and we were seeing some signs that there could potentially be some issues. By 1984, 1985, the economy started to weaken and we were seeing things like tax cuts and Fed interest rates becoming major factors contributing to a crisis that many people saw as inevitable. By 1986, rampant inflation, short-term costs were higher than the savings and loan were realizing, and there were more costs associated than returns, and this was crushing the mortgage market. I want you to pay attention to this because this would be realized again later on. Bank failure after bank failure led to decrease in overall market strength, and because of this, the economy started to tank. By 1989, the S&L crisis, or the savings and loan crisis, would be in full swing. Now, in 1989, the economy did something because of a result of restricted money policies that were enacted by the Federal Reserve. Hint, hint, wink, wink. Sound familiar? Yeah, pay attention to this because, again, history has a tendency of repeating itself. In 1989, the economy closed out with its weakest performance in almost 4 years. Now, the growth at the annual rate was only 0.5%. That's horrible. In some cases, it was actually negative GDP growth. Now, the economy dipped into a serious recession, and because of that, we saw two things happen in the numismatic realm. One of them was not expected. One of them was. So the first thing that was expected was we were going to see an increase in numismatic prices. So we would see increased premiums, and anybody who had a shop or anything during this time frame knows that some of the coins, the premiums were outrageous. But we also seen something in the rare market where it exploded and shot through the roof. In many cases, we saw increases of rare coins that went above 1,000% in just a couple years' time. But in the early 90s, we saw that number autocorrect. Now, this is not uncommon in the financial industry. We see rises and decreases all the time. And this is something that you need to be aware of. In the numismatic realm, we're going to see ebbs and flows. We're going to see increases and decreases. But most of the time, they're going to be tied to the external factors, and most of those external factors are going to be financial. So by 1994, we see a Balanced Budget Act of 1993 that has just been implemented. The GDP would start to rise. The Fed would begin discussions once again about raising the rate. Now, when they started to see the rate increase, now we started to see the overall numismatic value increase. There was a correlation there. But we started to see something as that, remember we talked about the housing bubble? Yeah, well, here we come. About 10 years later, we start to see that Fannie Mae, Fannie Mac decision, that kind of hasty lumping of all of these things into one, come back to haunt us. See, hasty decisions can cause us massive issues later on. And here we were, full circle, back in the same situation. bank closures, major issues within the financial market caused the 2008, as we know, the housing bubble. Now, numismatic values would see growth during this time frame, and that was really good, but a lot of people were losing massive amounts of money in stock markets and in the values of their home. See, 2008 saw a number of things that would be the highest in numismatic since the massive spike that we experienced in the early 80s. Now, we may never see that atypical growth that we saw again between 87 and 89. But we're starting to experience another uptrend, another uptick in numismatic prices. And that started about 3 years ago. It's been steadily climbing. And as a reminder, the information I'm talking about as far as numismatic items is not tied or not connected to the price of silver or gold. So these numismatic items, when we're talking about the rarity items, we're talking about the numismatic. It could be copper, it could be whatever, but there's a numismatic value to it. We're not necessarily tying it to the price of the silver or the price of the gold. Now, in some of the cases, when you're talking about non-rare, highly sought after items, then yes, they can have a correlation, they can have an impact. But for the ones that I'm talking about right now, there's really not much. It's an important distinction because there are items to consider in the rare side of numismatics. But not everybody's looking at the high end. Not every one of us can be a Brian. For those numismatists out there, you know who that is. Well, why did I just give you a financial history lesson? Well, because as 2023 shows us, volatility is going to continue to grow. And it's very likely that 2024 is going to be a monster. But as the volatility is there, the potential for numismatic value is going to increase. But just like in stacking, just like in understanding the value of your precious metals, you need to have your wits about you. At the start of this video, I stated I was going to share a really cool tool, some resources that you could use to gauge prices. Now, at the very beginning, buy, sell, or hold. And this was the question. And this is where we're going to get into answering that particular aspect. So the first one I have here is PCGS number 4683. It's 1877 cc, 10 cent, and it is listed at a very fine 20. Now, when you come up here, we're going to look at how the growth over time is. Now, the growth over time is going to show from 2019, it originally sold at $60. However, recently, the highest is going to be 160. That sold on Friday, December 1st. And again, it's the same grade VF20. Now, the reason that I did VF20 is that's what my particular coins are. And so it kind of gives me a good basic estimate of where these coins are at. Now, I've said this before. I said it at the beginning of the stream, and you'll hear me say this with all the tools that I show you. Not one of these tools are to be used in singular. They are to be utilized with other sets and other tools and other relations, all right? So you want to be working with your network. You want to be working with your coin shops. You want to be working with distributors. What are they buying it for? What are their prices? Get their gray sheets. Get that information. Be working with them in order to find that information. This is going to be paramount, and this is really going to save you. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to kind of go through it. I'm not going to be looking at the camera. I'm going to be looking at the screen to kind of show you. So I apologize for not looking directly at you, okay? But what we're going to do is we're going to come over here and we're going to look at my 1876. Whoops. 6. So we're going to go through. We're going to make sure that I choose the 1876 CC. I'm going to choose my very fine 20. And then as I choose my very fine 20, again, I have all the information there. I'm going to add that to the graph. Now you'll see that the graph populates and you'll see that there's something that's here. So this coin, the 1876, actually hasn't seen as much of a desired increase. What I want to do is I wanted to show you something where the price of silver or gold does have an effect. Okay, so this is why I said, again, you don't want to utilize this as a sole source instance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to type in peace dollars. And I'm going to look at, let's do a 1923 type 2 low relief. And this one, I'm going to bump it up. We're going to say MS60 on this particular one. And we're going to look at the pricing here, and you're going to see that there's a steady state ranging between $36 and $52 at MS60. If you look at the chart down below, you're going to see that during 2010, 2011, up into that 2012 timeframe, there was a real big increase for this. Now, remember that 2012 area is when we had that massive stock market crash. This was tied to silver. Silver shot up, so the price of this shot up. When this started to fall, the one thing that didn't fall as heavy were the premiums. The premiums took a lot longer to come down. So even though it did come down in price, it kind of maintained, it held its value. So you've seen a steady increase in the peace dollars along the way. But if I was to go ahead and come over here and let's do the 1926, we'll go ahead and pull that up here. We're going to still stick with the MS60. And you're going to see that there's been some increases here. Now, in sometime in 21, you saw a giant increase in relation to the price for this particular peace dollar. 1928, we're going to jump that in here. Now, we know there's going to be some change, but you actually see that there was a decrease. So in other areas where it stayed flat, in some of them, you're going to see that there's been a decrease in the pullback in the price of some of these, and then they came back up. Now, they've seen increases, but the increase here in the 1928 has only seen an increased revenue of 5%, where the other ones have seen a 45% over the same general time frame. So again, when you're looking at your return on investment, you need to be looking at this, kind of determine whether or not you think it's a good investment, but utilize this in relation to other items. Then you need to find, remember I talked about this in some of the other videos, you need to find that gap analysis, find out where your gaps are, look at your network, look at the people within your network, find out what those gaps are, and work on filling your gaps. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed this. Hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe. It's free. It really helps support the channel. We'll see you later.